Hi everyone, and welcome to this next session. I'm Susan Evans. I'm a practitioner member of the governing board, and I want to introduce you to John Hamwee. John is an experienced acupuncturist and zero balancer and teacher. He's the author of 7 books, including Intuitive Acupuncture, Experiencing Acupuncture, and Acupuncture for New Practitioners. So he's going to talk to us today about doing more with less and using our intuition. So I'll hand it, let me just say, if you have any questions, if you would type them into the chat box, and then at the end we can answer any questions. So as we go along, just put your questions in and we can go back to them at the end. So I'll hand over to you, John, and looking forward to hearing this talk. Thanks.
Thank you. I can't quite see hang on a minute. I can't see anybody. Sorry to hold everybody up. I can't see anything. Can you see me and can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can see and hear you, John.
Yes. Okay, I'll just go then. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. I want to suggest that if you use your intuition in the treatment room, you can do more precise and more powerful treatments, and you can do them with less effort and less stress. So here's how. I want to start with a common experience for me, which is agonizing in the treatment room. Is the voice I'm hearing a groan or is it a lack of laugh? Are the pulses wiry or are they just tight? Is that heart blood deficiency or liver blood, or is it heart and spleen? And in short, I get really tangled up in all the possibilities, and it's a bit like doing a crossword puzzle, trying to fit everything together. And I end up completely divorced from the patient. I might as well not be there. So this first quote means a lot to me. I will leave it to you to read out slide 1. Thank you. That's the end of slide 1. So perhaps you could take slide 1 down. Is that possible?
Yeah, it's now on the Das and Bush slide.
No. Okay, well, that's all right. Yeah, I guess it's okay. Could we, when the slides come, could they come up and then come down when I say, could you take them down, please? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks, that's better. So here's this quotation which talks about the need to respect the incredible diversity of individuals. We need diagnoses, don't we? We need categories, we just have to have them. So what's the solution to this? And the answer is to use your intuition. If in case you think intuition is something which is kind of flaky and unreliable, here's a quotation from a man who was a professor at Harvard, but many of you will know as a spiritual teacher. It's Ram Dass. Have slide 2, please. Slide 2. Thank you. That's my experience exactly. So here's the structure of this talk. I've got one more piece in this introduction. Then I'm going to give you 5 ways in which you can learn to recognize when your intuition is trying to help. Could we take the slide down now, please? Thank you. Then I'm going to show you 5 ways in which you can summon up your intuition when you need its help. And then I'll wrap it up with a conclusion about the effects of using intuition in the treatment room. But just to finish this introduction, there are 3 times when your intuition will really help you. The first and most obviously is when you're stuck with a patient. when you can't get the signs and symptoms and the pulses and tongues to fit into a plausible diagnosis. What are you going to do? You can't put needles in randomly. Or even more irritating in my experience is when you've got a brilliant diagnosis and the patient doesn't get better. What are you going to do then? I mean, you've exhausted all your ideas. You need a fresh approach, you need new insights. And another time I think it's really helpful, and I don't know if this is a common experience, but I think it is that patients do really well for the first 2 or 3 or 4 treatments. And then they sort of level off a bit and plateau. And I think what's happening is that they respond so well to any change in energy that after a bit, you need to be much more precise and the treatment has to be much more exactly for them. And so I think your intuition can help you get to that. And finally, don't forget yourself. If you're feeling weary with this work, if you're exhausted at the end of a day in the treatment room, then you need to refresh yourself and find again the joy of this amazing system of medicine. And your intuition, which is lighter and often more fun than cudgeling your brains to try and work things out, is a really good way to do it. Okay, that's why you need it. Now, I want to talk about 5 ways in which you can recognize when it's banging on the door and offering to help. It's always a surprise. So, recently I had a patient who had been irradiated working on the nuclear submarines at Barrow. He was the safety officer, ironically. I've treated him for about 15 years. He now has quite serious Parkinson's. He's been ill for a long time. And I know how to treat him. I basically treat water points mainly. But one day recently, at the end of his treatment, I thought, it's just not enough. I can't let him go. And I couldn't think what to do. So I went and looked out of the window, which, as you will discover, is a common thing I do in my treatments. I looked out of the window and said, what does he need? What point do I do? Help. And the answer came straight back, pericardium 6. Well, I couldn't think of a reason to do pericardium 6, but equally, I couldn't think of a reason not to do pericardium 6, so I did it. I got the best pulse change I've ever had with him. And later that evening, I went through his notes for 15 years. I went all the way through. I had never treated pericardium 6. It didn't fit in with any diagnosis I'd ever made of him, but my intuition knew it was just the right point. That's one. At the second time you know your intuition is trying to help is when words pop out of your mouth, which come as a surprise to you. They're coming from a different place than what you've thought and planned and organized in your head, and then the words come out. These come, they bypass your thinking brain entirely. Couple of examples. A man who had a really difficult problem at work, quite an emotional problem. She explained to me at some length. And at the end of it, I said, and he told me what he was planning to do. At the end, I said, that sounds a bit too sensible to me. And I was a bit shocked, really, because it sounded like a criticism, but it absolutely was revelation for him. As far as he was concerned, you couldn't be too sensible. The more sensible, the better. And he suddenly realized that sensible wasn't going to solve this problem. And indeed, that he'd been too sensible in much of his life. Or I once asked a woman, where did you go to university? I couldn't think of any reason why that said that. Turned out to be a crucial thing in her life, that she'd wanted to go to one university, her parents wanted to go to another, and the clash between them was really important. So these times when words pop out of your mouth, I think are to be valued and treasured, and they're often terrific indicators of how you can work more precisely with your patients and help them. The third time that I notice my intuition's trying to help is when at the end of the day, I'm looking back over the course of the day, and I think I behaved rather oddly with that person. You know, I was either a bit fierce or a bit jolly, or I waved my arms about a lot, or a recent one was I kept interrupting him. And, you know, I know perfectly well that listening to our patients is a really important part of what we do. I couldn't let this bloke go. I kept interrupting him over and over again. But what's going on? I think what's going on usually is that intuitively we've picked up where a patient is stuck energetically. So imagine you have a patient who's stuck in grief. You might find yourself suddenly going really quiet. And you might say something like, oh my God, that must have been terrifying. And the chi moves. The patient catches the fear and the chi moves. And hang on, I've got somebody else turning up now. The chi moves from metal to water. And I think you get the same thing happening as well when I get very bossy with a patient. I say, you must book in for 5 sessions, or you have to go to bed earlier. Yeah. I've got Rachel Marston's vision and sound coming in. Rachel, thanks. So I think when I get bossy with a patient, I'm going into wood to control earth. It's what Ted Kaptchuk calls medicine without form. Rachel, do you mind? I've got a very nice child bouncing about on my screen. Thank you. I call this backwards diagnosis. I'm not very good at forwards diagnosis, but backwards diagnosis, when I work out the patient's energy from what I do the thing backwards, and I like it a lot. The next time my intuition bangs on my door is when I find myself laughing in the treatment room. And it's because what's happened is it's a bit like that child's game where you play Hunt the Matchbox. And the best place to hide it is on the table in the middle of the room in full view, because children are looking underneath things and in cupboards, and they assume it's going to be hidden, but actually it's right there. And it's when an idea hits you and it's so obvious, and yet you haven't thought of it before, that you burst out laughing. So a recent one was, I needled liver 3, which I knew the patient needed, but then I couldn't think what else to do. Gallbladder points weren't attractive. Large intestine 4 gates was irrelevant. Pericardium 6 or 7, Zhuiyin, it's always a nice idea, but it didn't seem to be the point. So I looked out of the window, which is what I do, and bang, it was due 20. And I did actually laugh. It was like, oh, of course, just couldn't be anything else. I mean, if you want to check out these ideas that come to you with a laugh, make sure they make sense, you can, but I'm sure they will. The last one, the last time the intuition is helping, is when, and I'm sure you've had this experience often, is when the treatment room seems to relax, or it seems to breathe out or expand, or the air gets clearer somehow. It's a delightful feeling. And I think what's happening is there's been a very big energetic shift in the room for the better. And it's an energetic shift because of your treatment, what you've done. And therefore you can take it as a sign. It's like intuition is giving you feedback. Your rational mind will say, don't be silly, rooms don't breathe out and relax. But your intuition says, of course they do. This is what it's like. Everything's changed and for the better. So those are the 5 ways you can tell if intuition is calling. I'd like to have slide 3, please, which is just a summary of what I've said. So you can pick this up if you want. So it can suggest a point, blurt out words, change your behavior, make you laugh, or alter the atmosphere. Thanks, that's the end of slide 3. Now, the next bit is 5 ways in which your intuition can be summoned up if you need it. If you're stuck in the treatment room, don't know what to do, here are 5 ways that it'll help. You have to create the conditions for it, or it may be more accurate to say, you have to create the conditions where you can hear it, because I think it's always there. It's whispering, nudging, suggesting, pointing something out. So how do you do that? build in some pauses. I'll tell you 3 of mine. You might find other ones that work better for you. I take the patient's pulses. Just as I'm about to put them down, I look straight ahead and catch my patient's face in my peripheral vision. I get fantastic information. A man with a really severe chronic condition, suddenly I saw that he was at peace.
What?
Rachel, could you turn your mic off, please? Thanks. I could see he was at peace. And could you turn your video off, please, Rachel?
I think it might be her, just her child's kind of there with it, and she's stepped away. So.
Okay. Where was I? So let me get myself back. Oh, that's right. You get an impression of the patient with your peripheral vision, which you couldn't get by thinking hard about it. With somebody else, a very successful businessman, I suddenly thought he was really apprehensive. This man is not as confident as I took him to be. The second time I build in a pause is I've taken the pulses and tongues, I've gone to my desk and noted it down, and on the way back, I stop and look out of the window just for a few moments. And it's the saying of an old chess master. He said, if you see a really good move, sit on your hands because there's a better one. And it's like that. I'm halfway back to the patient, thinking I know what points to do. And I suddenly think, oh no, there's a better one, or a slightly different diagnosis. That pause just before I start. And the third pause I always do is just before I needle a point. I think of it as asking the point to tell me if it's okay. Sometimes it suggests going in at a different angle. Sometimes it suggests a different point, often nearby, like kidney 6 instead of kidney 3, or bladder 63 instead of 64. Often really helpful. And occasionally it's quite rude. It says, what do you think you are doing? This is bonkers. Do not needle this point, which is really helpful because then I can go away and think again. So those are my 3 pauses. They're part of a bigger issue, really. It's that if you pause, if you allow yourself a little bit of space, you can get a direct experience of your patient's energy. Instead of trying to work it out all the time, you can feel it. And this is reliable information, which I'll explain in a moment. So let's just take a tiny experiment. Close your eyes for a moment and feel what it would feel like in your body to have weak spleen energy. Just feel weak spleen energy. Okay, come back to yourself. Now close your eyes once more, and this time feel strong kidney energy. Feel what that feels like. Come back to yourself, open your eyes. Completely different. You can pick that up intuitively in the treatment room. I mean, some of you may be thinking, what if I'm making it up? But you're not making it up. It's an experience. You can make up thoughts and ideas that come and go like mad. But an experience like that is reliable. If you're with someone who drives you mad, who annoys you, who always says the wrong thing, always asks a question you wish he hadn't done, that's a completely different experience from being with someone you know and love, who relaxes you and makes you feel well and happy. You can't confuse them. And I think it's the same with your patient's energy, especially when they're out of balance, actually. It's easier to feel it then. The next way of summoning up your intuition is to notice things that are irrelevant, but which you can't somehow stop thinking about. I had one day, there was a beetle on the blind of my treatment room. the most beautiful thing with iridescent colors. I was transfixed by this. Or a patient who has a completely unblemished skin, but she has on her forehead a line which is like a hockey stick. And it's not a line in her skin, it's not a worry line, it's not a scar. And I keep thinking, what on earth could have happened to her that produced that line? Or the sun comes out on a cloudy day, comes through the window of the treatment room and lands on my patient's right shoulder. Now, you don't have to believe that the universe is telling you something to make use of these things. So with the beetle, I thought maybe something new's happening here today. Maybe I shouldn't just be doing the same old thing. With the sunshine on the shoulder, I thought maybe I should be treating lung 1 or spleen 20. And actually I did both, which I've never done as a combination before. And I don't think I've ever done it since, actually. And you may think it's balmy to sort of treat these things as helpful. But really, if you're stuck, the key thing is to get unstuck. And it doesn't matter how balmy it seems to be, if it does the job. And actually, it's quite fun too. And, you know, a bit more fun in the treatment room is not a bad idea. Okay. The next way of summoning up your intuition is to think of an image for your patient. So looking out the window one day, I see Monty the mouse. Monty the mouse lives in my garden. He's about the size of my thumb. He scurries around 100 miles an hour and he eats almost all the vegetables I grow. He doesn't like red ones for some reason, but green, fabulous. And I have a love-hate relationship with Monty the mouse. Anyway, I looked out the window one day, there was Monty doing his stuff. And I suddenly realized that my patient was Monty the mouse. She was relentlessly on a treadmill. She gobbled up everything she could present it to her. She never took nothing in as nourishment. And I thought, I've got to treat small intestine. I'd never treated small intestine on her before. And I've got to calm and disperse and soothe her energy in treatments. And I got that from thinking of her as Monty the mouse. So, another small experiment. Think of a patient who isn't doing as well as you would like. Just summon him or her to mind. Don't tell me you haven't got one. Okay. You can think, what kind of animal is this person? Cow? Horse? Kangaroo? Monkey? Cockatoo? If you find yourself smiling, you're probably onto something because you spotted a connection that you might not have spotted before. And if you like this idea, you can do it with all sorts of things. I quite often do it with musical instruments. Energetically, a violin and a trombone are completely different. So is an electric guitar. I have a patient who is definitely a bass guitar. You dum, 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 in the background. It never has a tune. He always just says dum, dum, dum in the background. And it's really helpful to treat him, to know that. Okay. Last one. If you want to summon up your intuition, another way of doing it is to create a vacuum and it will come and fill it up. Here's one way I do it. Say I have two things to say to the patient. You better not eat phlegm-producing foods and you really should go to bed earlier. I say to the patient, I've got three things to say to you when I've only actually got two. I add an extra one. And I have never, ever had the experience of my intuition not producing the third thing. It always turns up and it's nearly always better than the two I thought of. It might seem a bit risky, but it isn't. It will come. And I mean, the worst comes to worst, it doesn't come. The patient won't remember you said three instead of two. It's worth a try. I found it really helpful. Okay, could we have slide 4 now, please? These are just a summary of the 5 ways in which you can summon up your intuition. You take a pause, feel the energy, notice things that are apparently irrelevant, use an image, and create a vacuum. Thanks, that's the end of slide 4. I'm going to come to the conclusion now. The first thing I want to do is put all this in context. I am not suggesting that you ignore the wisdom of centuries as to the functions of the organs, everything you've learned from the textbooks, everything you've learned at college. You don't abandon your way of working things out rationally. I am suggesting you balance it up a bit. Here's a quotation. This is slide 5, please. Here's a quotation from a man who was a Nobel-winning chemist who invented the polio vaccine, which eradicated polio in the world. That's the end of slide 5. Thank you very much. So I am suggesting use your intuition to balance up all the left brain rational training you've had. When you use your intuition, you're coming from a completely different place from that rational left brain mindset, and it has consequences. The first consequence is that it's contagious. Your patients will catch it. They will start to get more intuitive about their own lives. They will start saying things like, you know, I'm not going to take that Bacchanaise anymore. I just don't think it's doing me any good. Or recently, a woman who's a dancer and a dance teacher, she had a chronic pain in her right knee. And I treated her for about 6 months. It got completely better. And about a year later, she came back and she said, my pain's back exactly as before. I said, what have you been doing? She said, no, nothing, she said. And I said, go on, what did you do yesterday? She said, I just went for a walk. Oh my God, I went for a walk with my mother. It turned out that her mother made her ride horses when she didn't want to. And when she was little, she fell off a horse onto her right knee. And her mother, instead of being sympathetic, was angry with her. So this poor kid, instead of getting nourishment and support from her mother, was rejected. And it was all in her right knee, because that's when she hit the ground. And this conversation with her mother had brought it all back. So enabling patients to have insights like that's a really important part of the healing process. It's just as important in its way as our needles and our moxa. And then there's the effect that using intuition has on you. Say you have a patient with headaches. You look up headaches in Giovanni, and there are 14. I looked it up. There are 14 discriminations, 14 diagnoses. So you find the one which fits your patient most nearly, and you do that. You do the points he tells you to do. It's very comfortable. You're following in the footsteps of the master. That's the best thing you can possibly do for your patient. Whereas if you're using your intuition, you're on your own. There's nobody telling you what to do. There's nobody telling you it's right. You have got to trust that in yourself. And that's a really important shift, because then you can't possibly be a sort of mini Giovanni or a sub J.R. Worsley or a less than adequate John or Angie Hicks. You're just yourself. That's it. You're authentic, for better or worse. And actually, it's for better. Your patients love it if you're more authentic in the treatment. They don't want a clone of somebody else. They want you. And actually, it's not just your patients. Your family and friends like it too if you're more authentic. And actually, it's not even a bad idea to be more authentic with yourself, which is the hardest thing of all to do. And there's one last thing. The conventional wisdom is that intuition comes from the right brain. And it might be true, I don't know. But I can't experience things coming from different sides of my brain. I can experience things coming from my heart. And my experience is that intuition comes from the heart. I think that when you do treatments which are infused with intuition, they're more heartfelt treatments. It's the difference for me between having a good meal in a busy restaurant in a city centre and having food cooked for you by someone who knows you and appreciates you and wants to be with you. So I suggest to you that one of the wonderful things about using intuition in the treatment room is it helps you to do more heartfelt treatments and to balance up a bit the kind of rational, analytical thinking which we were all taught. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was absolutely fascinating. So if anybody has any questions, would you please put them in the chat box? I have a question I wanted to ask. Do you have anything specific that you do before you go into the treatment room or before you start treating a patient to help you with your intuition?
I don't think I do. Whether I did at the beginning, I can't now remember. I get myself in the state where I'm ready for them rather than normal life. So I have a mantra, you know, which is, may I see my patient clearly, may I treat them accurately, and may I water the seeds of joy in them.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Maybe that summons my intuition, I don't really know, but that's what I do.
Yeah, because I do think it's, you know, because we can become so judgmental that we block that intuition, don't we? And to be able to do something like that,
absolutely,
really helps to just to be open to it, you know, and to be open to those messages that are coming to us.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I've got a couple of questions here. People are saying great, food for thought, and they really find it fascinating. So please, Louisa has asked, please, could we touch on the connection between our yi intention and our intuition?
That's a very deep question, and I'm not sure I have much to say about it. It's certainly true that yi is that momentary, animal, quick, immediate understanding. But to be honest, I just, I don't think I've got anything more to add, except I'm sure there's a connection. I don't know what it is.
She said she's sorry, but it just kept popping into her head as you were talking.
Okay, so my answer to that is experiment with it yourself and see if when you use your intuition, it feels like yi. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Somebody else has asked, oh, hang on, there's a few coming here. Would you say you were tuning into the chi of the moment in the room?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the reason I talked about experiencing your patient's energy rather than trying to work it all out in your head as if it was a crossword puzzle. You pick it up in the moment. And I think part of the issue really is learning to trust that. So when you begin with this, you think, am I making this all up? You aren't, but you might think you are. So if you want to take a check on yourself, every time you do a treatment which has some intuition, just jot down on your notes, intuition, and then see if they do well with it. You can keep a check.
Yes, yeah. Chinzia has said that there is a very old article about this by Volker Schild and Dan Bensky.
Yeah, Dan Bensky, yeah.
And Dan Bensky, is it? Yeah, yeah. And people are just saying what a wonderful talk, very inspiring. And a reminder to be with the energy that's in the room.
Yeah.
And here's one. Joseph wants to know, what do you think of writing freely first thing in the morning to prepare for the day?
I'm sure it's a great idea.
Yeah, great idea. So somebody else saying they have your book on intuition. They feel our intuition is massively important when working with our patients. And I believe most practitioners will more than likely be doing it without realizing. Yeah,
I think that's exactly right. And what I'm on about really is helping people to be aware of what they're actually doing so that they can do it better, or they can do it more reliably, or they can do it without feeling nervous about it. But I'm quite sure that we all work intuitively, hugely. But if we pretend we're not, I think we can get into trouble with that.
Yeah, So another question here, do you ever receive inspiration in the form of dreams? I've had this happen on one occasion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
your unconscious is at work all the time. And it's certainly at work when you're asleep. And some dreams can be really powerful and helpful. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Felicity has asked, given that our intuition is not perfect and can be biased, when should we trust our clinical intuition and when is a more systemic, rational approach needed? How do we work that out? And how do we check we are not just following a confirmation bias?
Right. Well, this clues into a huge piece of work done by Abram Tversky and the man who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, who's a Nobel Prize winner. I just can't get his name at the moment. But they did a massive research on this, exactly this. And the conclusion they came to was that the intuition of professionals is reliable when two conditions are met. The first is the work has to be repetitive. If you don't do it repeatedly, then you can't learn from it. And the second is that you have to get feedback on the work you've done. So they found, for example, that nurses' intuition is really reliable and radiographers is really unreliable because they're looking at a photograph of a patient. They never see the patient, they never see them again, and they never know if their interpretation was accurate. And they found that they were massively inaccurate. But there's a whole book about it, which I'm sure you can find, or a series of articles. There's one chapter in my book about when is intuition reliable and when isn't it. But I certainly, in the culture we live in, the assumption is it's unreliable. And I think that's just untrue. I think we should assume it's reliable until proved otherwise, especially in our work, because we meet the two conditions of, it's driving me mad not thinking of his name. But,
is it Kahneman?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Felicity has put down Kahneman.
Kahneman and Tversky. Yeah,
yeah.
We meet their two conditions as a profession. Yeah.
Okay, and Ian Appleyard has said that the Chinese has a phrase, qi chang, which to mean the chi field around a person that you can feel,
yeah.
especially if you like or dislike someone.
Yeah.
There's a similar structure. It's a similar structure to qi chang, which means I'm probably not pronouncing these right. Qi chang, which means magnetic field. So, and Joseph has said that there's a study that also found that nurses' intuition is more accurate in emergencies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and there's terrific amounts of work being done on that, and it's really fascinating. And yeah, nurses are really good at it because they meet the two conditions. They're with the patients a lot, and they see the results of what's happened.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's absolutely fascinating. Have we any more questions? I think we'll all be tuning in a little bit more to those damn things that come into our head that we push away too easily, don't we? So, this person is blood deficient, I have to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, John. Sorry?
Just try it, as I say to everybody, just try it.
Yeah, right. Oh, we've got another comment here. I liked a documentary about the Arctic outposts who need huge deliveries every year, and the head of this operation would use all of his engineering and physics and experts around him. But if on the day of the delivery there was any intuitive factor that it shouldn't go ahead, they would stop it. Right. So it's fascinating, isn't it? That scientists turn to intuition.
No, scientists don't have any problem with this. The ones I know, who, really serious scientists, they know perfectly well they're using the intuition all the time. And mathematicians say that too. It's only people who can be accused of being flaky like us who are quite frightened of it.
Yeah. We think we have to stick to these rigid guidelines, don't we? So thank you, John. That was absolutely fascinating. I think we've all really enjoyed that and it's given us real food for thought. And thank you, everybody. What a fantastic day we've had. It's been really, really interesting and fabulous to be able to do this online. I want to say a big thank you to Helen, who has organised this day for us. And I also want to thank our headline sponsor, Suen Herbs, and our other sponsor, which is the Northern College of Acupuncture. And you can now go into breakout rooms with the sponsors and hear what they have to say. There are some talks, I think, from the sponsors. And for those of you that are back tomorrow, I should really look forward to seeing you. If you're not back tomorrow, the recordings from today will be sent to you via email sometime before the 23rd of the month. So thank you for being here and hopefully see you tomorrow. Okay, thank you.